Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Statistics Solutions webinar on Chapter 2, the Literature Review. Okay, before we get started, we have a co-host on who is right now posting links where you can access recording of this webinar. You can also access recordings of previous webinars. We archive them for a period of time on our website. So those links are there. Okay, as well as other resources we have on our website. Okay, as far as questions go, we'll have a question and answer session at the end. So I just would ask that you hold your questions until then. If you want to type your questions into the question and answer box so you don't forget them, that's fine. But we'll just get to them at the end. Okay, so let's move forward here. The Chapter 2, the literature is usually the literature review. Our kind of general template or model for the dissertation for the social sciences is based on the 5-chapter model, which is pretty typical. There are some deviations to that, but the 5-chapter model is pretty standard, where Chapter 1 is the introduction. Chapter 2 is the literature review. Chapter 3 is the methods. Chapter 4 is where you present your results. And Chapter 5 is the discussion of the results. All right, so here is what we're going to cover. And just to pull back and kind of get a sense of what the literature review is and what its purpose is. The purpose of the literature review is not only to provide, a context for your study and to show what research is out there on your topic. It also, it's kind of an extended argument as well. So it's also, it also supports your research problem. Right. So part of what you should be doing is not just kind of summarizing and synthesizing and discussing the literature, but also talking about where you have an opportunity, to highlight how this research kind of informs what you're going to be doing, or show that, what researchers have done on your topic, but you always want to highlight what they haven't done, and hence what your research problem is and why the study is needed. So the literature review not only acts like, again, a context in reviewing the material on your topic, but again, kind of an argument for why you're focusing on what you're focusing on, kind of an argument to support the research problem. All right, so this is the lit review. The sections are pretty typical, are the introduction, the literature search strategy, the theoretical framework. Sometimes goes into Chapter 2, sometimes it goes in Chapter 1, sometimes it goes in both. Then the review of the literature is really the bulk of the lit review, probably 80% of it. And that is going to be different for everybody's dissertation, everybody's study, because everybody's doing something different. And the research is going to be different for each one. And so that's going to be based on what you're doing, and we'll get to that when we get to that section. And a summary. The length of the lit review, you want to, it varies, it depends. I've seen lit reviews that are 10 pages. I've seen lit reviews that are 80 pages. Usually it's somewhere in between. Always obtain your school's template or guidelines for the dissertation, for the chapters, because sometimes that will let you know, if there's a page length requirement, or ask your chair if you're unsure. Usually the sweet spot is about 25 to 30 pages for the lit review. Again, sometimes a little more, sometimes you can get away with a little less, but usually 25 to 30 pages is standard. But again, see what your school, if your school has any requirements or guidelines that they want you to follow, that's what you should base that on. As far as anything in here that may deviate slightly from what we're presenting, always follow your school's guidelines. Okay, but this is a good general kind of format that we're going to talk about today. Okay, the introduction. Just like the introduction of other chapters, you're just reorienting your reader about what you're doing and what you're doing in the chapter specifically. So it's always a good idea just to restate the purpose of your study. Because the introduction is not that long, right? Restate the purpose of your study, remind the reader of the importance and the need for your study, right? And you can preview content or sections of the chapter if you want to at the end of the introduction. So pretty basic stuff for the introduction. Next, usually it comes a section, something like literature search strategy or methods of searching or something like that. Again, check your templates. Most schools require a section like this. Some schools don't. But the idea is that the lit review should be comprehensive, right? So in other words, they want you to cast a wide net, to see, to get as much material on your topic as you can, so you don't miss anything. So they, your professors, the reader wants to know how you went about searching material so they can, it shows them that you've kind of performed a comprehensive search, right? It helps, give them confidence that, okay, the way this person described how they search for material, it shows me that they did cast a wide net. They did get, they did do a comprehensive search and got the material they needed. So what does this section look like? Again, it's not too long, but basically you're going to be describing the steps you took for your search, right? So you want to list the databases that you used. Obviously, first you want to talk a little bit about the library you use, right? If it's your school library, you accessed it through maybe the online library portal. You want to say that. You used whatever school you're at, their library accessed, however you accessed it. List the databases that you searched, right? So anything like Google Scholar, or there's several: Academic Source Complete, Academic Source Premier. Some of these are big search tools, so they search multiple databases, so they give you a lot of coverage. There's also specialty databases, like education databases, like ERIC, which is an acronym for, I think it's Educational Resource something, I forget. So any kind of databases are big. There's big search tools that you use. You want to list those. If sometimes your chair wants you to search in a specialized journal, like a journal in your field, if you searched any specialized journals, you want to list those. You also want to include any key terms, the terms that you search, your search terms, right? And the combinations. Just have a list of the terms. And these aren't anything, out of left field. These are going to be things that correspond to, like, your variables, that you're studying, your factors, your major concepts, right? These are the terms that you're going to be used to search for material. So you want to list those terms. You also want to include any kind of way you qualified or filtered your search. Some things are like English only. You want, things returned only in English, or whatever language, do you speak and read. Full text, if you only wanted material that was full text. But the next two are real important to mention: date of publication and whether the material was peer reviewed. So date of publication first. Typically, ideally, you want material to be as recent as possible in your lit review. The reason for this is, you're giving a snapshot of current and recent research, right? You're not so concerned with, research is 15, 20 years ago, because unless it's foundational, because things have changed, right? I mean, and it maybe the study's already been conducted, or, if things are happening 20 years ago, that gives us a sense of what was happening 20 years ago in research, but not now. So, and usually, I don't say usually, sometimes schools will have requirements that, the material in the lit review has to be published within 5 years. Sometimes it's 5 to 7 years. Sometimes it's 10 years. Some schools don't have any requirements, so you're going to have to check about that. But usually it's best to stay with recent research, right? Again, because it gives us a sense of what's going on now and currently and recently, rather than, what happened in the research 20, 15 years ago, which may not be relevant anymore. So if that's the case, you want to say that you included, your search included primarily material published in the last 5 years, or the last 10 years, or whatever it is, especially if your school has that requirement. It's very important also to say that the material you search for was primarily peer reviewed, right? And peer reviewed means that the articles have scholarly quality, right? They have scholarly merit because they've been reviewed before they were published by peer professionals in the field, right? To see if, if they're appropriate quality to be published in whatever journal it is. So peer review is important, and most, if not all, the material that you're reviewing in the review should be peer reviewed. I mean, you can use sometimes like government websites or state websites for statistics or for informational purposes, but mostly you want to be reviewing peer-reviewed research, peer-reviewed studies on your topic. So it's real important to mention in this section that the material you include in search for was peer-reviewed. How do you know if your material is peer-reviewed? And when you're searching for material on, just say you're in your university's library online, searching, there will be a button you can click that says return to me only peer-reviewed material, and usually when the articles pop up, they'll say that they are somewhere, it'll say that it's peer-reviewed. So that's how you can tell. There's also a resource called Ulrix. I'm going to put it here. And you can access it through your library too. And this will, if you're uncertain about whether something's peer reviewed, this is a resource that can help you determine whether something's peer reviewed. But usually these days, that when you have the button clicked to return me only peer reviewed materials, and they say it right on the what you get back from the article itself, usually it's pretty clear whether material is peer reviewed. Okay, and you can't see what I typed in the chat. I don't know, I can type it again. I'm not. We can come back to that too. I can put it in the maybe the question and answer box later. It's called Ulrix, U-L-R-I-C-H, S''S. Okay. Sarah, I'm not sure why this person can't have a question. Okay. All right, so back to the literature search strategy section. Some of these sections, use your resources, go to webinars, use the internet to, to help you out, or, reputable sources, obviously. But sometimes, just get an example, if you can, if you haven't already, of an approved dissertation from your school, close to what you're doing, and just see what some of these sections look like. sometimes there's just kind of no better resource than a good example. Let me see a message from Sarah. Okay. Sarah, I'm not really sure what's going on. Okay. It says to hosts and panelists. Everyone. Okay. How about that? Okay, great. All right. The last thing I want to say about this section is, and the search in general, not really the section so much, but if you need to use the assistance of a research librarian, that's part of their job. You're not going to be bugging them. It's part of the job of research librarians to help students kind of navigate the research process. And so I think you can get assistance with that right online. I would say definitely take advantage of that, especially if you're struggling with some kind of the search processes, or just kind of not understanding things, or it's just a little troublesome. Or even if you're not having trouble, they're great, not just for kind of, I don't know what you might call that kind of assistance, but just to kind of guide your search, just to kind of help you. So reference librarians, keep them in mind for assistance with your lit review and your searching. After that section usually comes a theoretical framework, but again, check your template for your school. Sometimes the theoretical framework appears in chapter 1, a shortened version, and a more extended version appears in chapter 2. That's pretty typical. Sometimes the theoretical framework only appears in chapter 1. Sometimes it only appears in chapter 2. It's kind of dependent on the school. But if your theoretical framework needs to go in chapter 2, this would be the place to put it. So what kind of, we need to talk about two things, what a theoretical framework is, actually three. What a theoretical framework is, what's the difference between a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework, and what to put in the section itself. So first, what's a theoretical / conceptual framework? Basically, it's one theory or a set of theories, or one concept or a set of concepts, if it's a conceptual framework, put together that's going to help guide your study. It's going to help guide it interpretively too. So when you get to your results, discussion of the results at the end, it helps you to kind of explain your results. It also helps guide your study too. And it's built on what you're studying specifically, right? So let's take the theory. Well, let's go to what's the difference between a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework. I take a real practical approach, and theoretical frameworks are typically associated with quantitative studies, and conceptual frameworks are typically associated with qualitative studies. And the reason for that is that quantitative studies usually proceed deductively, right? So you're taking a general theory and you're going to apply it to a specific population or a specific circumstance, right? And then you're going to use that general theory to explain what you found. Qualitative studies work inductively. So they usually involve interviews. And you're seeking to get details, right? And people's experiences and perceptions. So you don't want a theory ahead of time to kind of overlay over that, right? You want the details and the experiences to speak for themselves. And so from those details and experiences that you get from the interviews, when you collect data, you want to make conclusions based on that. So it kind of works backwards than, imposing a theory on it. So you use a conceptual framework instead of a theoretical framework. And yes, just like they sound, theoretical frameworks contain theories. Conceptual frameworks usually contain just concepts, because again, you don't want a big theory already kind of helping you to pushing you to interpret or giving you a framework for the data. So concepts don't do that. All right, so theoretical framework. The best way to proceed is with an example. Let's say you're conducting a quantitative study on the relationship between transformational leadership and emotional intelligence. Those are your two big variables. So your theoretical framework needs to support and encompass those variables, right? So you'll need a theory for leadership, or specifically transformational leadership, and you would need a theory for emotional intelligence. Okay, the idea is to say something like, these two theories will serve as a theoretical framework for my study. And then you probably should take each theory individually, define the theory, talk about who developed it, talk about what they developed it for, right? Theories are developed to explain things. So talk about a little bit what the person developed the theory to explain. Talk about how other researchers have used the theory. What have they used it for? What have they looked at with it? Define the theory. Along with theories usually have components or elements to them. Define any of those that are relevant to your study. For example, I know emotional intelligence has several components. If you're studying those, you want to mention them and you want to define them. Then do the same for the next theory, and then talk a little bit about how each relates to what you're doing specifically. Okay. I think that's it generally. Let's see. I think I'm missing something. Who developed the theory to explain what? Okay. Right. How it connects to your study. For the theoretical framework, again, the quantitative study. Usually you'll be using, unless you're using, archival data, you'll be using a questionnaire or survey. If that's the case, you want the survey to match the theory. And what do I mean when I say that? Well, let's just take emotional intelligence again. You're gonna study emotional intelligence. You're gonna measure it. So you're gonna be giving somebody surveys. Now, there's different surveys for emotional intelligence, right? There's several. So you pick the one that best suited for your study. Let's just say it's Goldman's instrument. He's one of the big proponents of emotional intelligence. Well, if you use Goldman's instrument, you want to use Goldman's theory. Makes sense, right? I mean, you don't want to use Goldman's theory and use somebody else's theory, because all these instruments have a theoretical foundation, right? They all come from something, and they come from theories. So Goldman's theory is going to be matched to his instrument, right? You don't want to use Goldman's instrument and use Smith's theory, because the theories will have deviations. They'll have differences. Otherwise, they'd be the same thing. Just like your instruments are going to have some differences and deviations. So whoever, the foundational basis, the theoretical foundation for the instrument, you want to use the same researcher's theory for that. It makes sense? Okay. Now for the conceptual framework, there are similarities and differences, and some of the similarities are, it's kind of the same idea, but instead of using theories, you're using concepts. So again, remember, you don't want that. You don't want to have a theoretical overlay over something already, because that's already kind of giving you an interpretive framework. So what concepts do, so if you're studying, say, like barriers to advancement for women or something in the workplace, you want some kind of concept about barriers. and advancement and gender. There may not be theories for that. So you want, big challenges to advancement, barriers to advancement, that concept, and pull it from the literature, right? It can't just kind of be your own, but what does some of the pertinent or the relevant literature show that are barriers, right? So you want to use these concepts as your framework. So the idea is the same. You're just not using theories, you're using concepts. And the concepts are going to align with precisely what you're doing. But the moves are similar, right? What does a concept mean? You have to define it. How does it relate to what you're doing? And another difference about the conceptual framework is that it will help to guide your interview questions, right? Not your research questions, your interview questions, the questions that you actually ask people when you sit down to interview them, because you'll need some kind of guidance in how to draft the questions. You can't just kind of, make them up out of nowhere. So your conceptual framework will have ideas in there, have concepts and ideas and things that you can pull from to guide your interview questions. So that's the quick version of the theoretical framework. This is a real good section to, go to your examples, because again, it's one of these things. You haven't done this before, right? So again, you can go to webinars, you can use your resources and all this, but when you sit down to write it, you may be scratching your head. It's like, I thought I got it. So examples help. Okay, review of the literature. This is the next section, and this is going to be, I would say 80% of the lit review is the review of the literature, and it's challenging. I'm not gonna lie, because you have a lot of material, right? You have a lot of material on your topic, and one of the challenges is going to be organization. How are you going to organize all this, and how are you going to present it, right? And so you're going to have to chunk it up into headers, right? Into sections, right? Into subsections. And what you want these sections to correspond to are your major factors, your variables, your major concepts, the things that you're studying, right? So you're not going to go off track. I'm studying emotional intelligence and transformational leadership. Well, those are the things you need to cover, right? And those are going to correspond to your sections. You're going to have one on emotional intelligence. You define it, and then you start talking about the recent literature on it that relates to what you're studying. You might have to have subsections within that based on what you find, and that's fine. Because you have to remember that as a writer, you have to make your document reader friendly, right? So you have to keep the reader in mind all the time. Solid blocks of text with no break, no headers, nothing to tell the reader when you're shifting gears to another topic. That's not reader friendly, and it's very formidable. So, part of the organizational scheme and the use of headers and sections is not only is it writer friendly, in other words, it helps you to chunk material and to understand the material in compartments, but it helps your reader to do that too, to follow along. Okay. So the lit review is going to involve those sections based on your variables, your factors, your major concepts. You're going to, chunk it out into subsections as needed based on the topics that you find in the literature. That's why they're all different, right? Because you're all looking at different things, and the literature is all different on it. But part of what you should be doing is synthesis and analysis. And synthesis just means bringing things together to make a whole, right? So you want to combine information about the studies to make your points. What do I mean by factors? Factor is not factor analysis. It's another term is variable, right? I just mean your variables. Sometimes they're referred to as factors. Okay, synthesis. Yeah, bringing parts of the information from the studies together to make a point. And this is where we can kind of go back to to middle school or wherever we learned, paragraph organization. And I see this a lot. And it's not because people don't know how to write paragraphs. It's because you have a lot of information and you don't know what to do with it. But just to remember the fundamentals of organization and starting at the paragraph level will get you a long way here. And we all know what a paragraph includes, right? A topic sentence, evidence of the topic or discussion of the topic, and some kind of summary statement or transition to the next topic. And here's an example. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but the yellow corresponds to the topic sentence, the green material from the beginning to the end is all the kind of discussion of the evidence related to the topic, and the teal is the summary sentence. But what you can see is that there's a topic, and the person's not just looking at one study at a time, right? They have a topic, and the topic is that health literacy can help in diabetic self-control. Okay, and then there's material from 3 different studies that discuss and support that topic, right? And then there's a summary sentence at the end. And I want to draw your attention to a couple things here. Now, there's a little analysis in here, and we're going to get to that in a minute. Analysis. So it's not just summarizing. There's a little bit of analysis here. It says recent research has mostly shown that health literacy is an important factor. Okay, I have the word mostly in there because there's going to be one study that didn't show that, right? And that is down, right, whoops, sorry. Well, I can't highlight it. But you see here, unlike Anders et al. And Gregory et al., Phillips et al. Found no statistically significant relationship between diabetes knowledge and glycemic control. Okay, so this is one that's different. It didn't find the thing that the other things. That's why I used the term mostly up in the first sentence. But then there's a reason why, which they attributed to a small sample size and possibly errors associated with self-reported instruments. Okay, that's a little bit of analysis, right? It's a something different that this person found. But then it's accounted for, right? It may have been because of these 2 things, which is a little bit of analysis, which means you're digging into it a little bit more. You're just not summarizing it. And then the ending sentence kind of reflects that. It says empirical evidence from recent research largely supports. Again, largely supports means that most of it does, but not all of it. So that would be an example that you could pull from a lit review as an example of synthesis, right? Bringing components from the studies together, details from the studies, right? Findings from the studies together to make a point. And you would just move on to your next point. And this would be embedded into, a larger section on whatever it was you're discussing. Analysis. The lit review should also include some analysis. Now that doesn't mean you need a separate section for analysis. It just means, like in the example I showed you, that we're the shortcomings of the study, the limitations of the study, small sample size, errors associated with self-reported instruments. That's analysis, right? So you can work analysis in. And part of what it involves when you're writing the lit review is noting shortcomings or gaps, right? Because remember, in the large sense of things, the lit review should make an argument for your research problem, for why you're conducting your study. So anytime that you can bring up a weakness or a shortcoming in the research, or something that doesn't cover, that your study is going to cover, that's good. You should be analytical in that sense and bring that up, and just reinforce the need for your own study. Note trends and gaps in the research. Again, yeah, like I just said, reiterate the research problem and need for your study where appropriate. And again, the whole thing culminates in an argument for conducting your study based on what's in and what's not in the research and what the research is not covering, which is what your study is going to cover. So again, you don't need a section of analysis, but just you kind of work it in when you can. So the review is not, completely summary. It involves some summary, some synthesis, some analysis. And usually the chapter has a summary, right? And like any summary, recap major points from the chapter. And that's going to mean, in this case, recapping some of the major points from the literature, right? Some of the major trends. You can't cover it all because it's going to be a lot, but some of the major findings from the literature you're going to want to recap. And then also remind the reader of the research problem based on what's in and what's not in the literature, right? So when you recap some of the major points from the literature, you also want to remind the reader that what it's not covering, right? What the gaps are, and that will let you highlight or reiterate the need for your own study. And really that's it. That's kind of general overview of the lit review and its purpose. This is our information, right? This is what we do. This is some of our contact information. Feel free to reach out if you want to meet with somebody to learn more about what we do and if it's right for what you need. We also have resources on our website, so it's just a good idea to go there and just kind of nose around. I'm going to leave that up. I also want to mention a resource called Research Rabbit. I don't know if anybody's used this, but I'm going to put the URL here on the screen in a minute. Give me a second here. Okay. Okay, Research Rabbit is something I've looked at it a little bit, and I know other people have used it. It's really a place that you can put articles. Once you find them, you can put them in there, and it really acts as a way to map like articles. Like you get a lot of articles, you get 20 articles, or how many you're going to ever have for your lit review. It kind of gives you a graphic, a way to represent your articles and the way they're kind of related graphically. So it can be helpful as kind of an organizational tool, or just as a map, really, I guess, as a kind of an organizational map, it kind of looks like. But it's something you may want to check out. It could be helpful for you for your lit review, as far as keeping like articles together and grouping them, which can be helpful. And like I said, in some of these sections. Do I have an example of what? Yeah, paragraphs, synthesis. Yeah. Okay. Research Rabbit. I don't have you just go to the website and just look. They have a tutorial video about what they're about. That's much more complete and better than I can give you here. But yeah, just go to the Research Rabbit. It's the website, and it's free. I didn't mention that. You just have to create an account, and it's free. And it's a kind of a way to map the articles that you have. It helps group them by like topics and things like that. Okay. Oh, before this, okay. Okay. Now what about the synthesis? Yeah, I mean, we're in the question and answer session now. So if you have any questions, just let me know. The synthesis slide here. Yeah, synthesis is bringing things together to make a whole, right? Or to Yeah. So you combine information from the studies to make your points. And that's what the synthesis paragraph is. You know, the point is the topic sentence. And, you know, this person has brought in details from the study, what the study is about, what they found, to help show, to help support this one point, right? And that's an example of synthesis. So you combine information from the studies, you know, the participants, what the purpose of the study was, the findings, right? And you put like studies together, right, that have made, you know, that have found similar things. And the rest is just, you know, standard paragraph organization. Any questions? Any other questions, or did I answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? I mean, the chapter 2 is it's challenging. And it's long. It's you know, there's just no way around it, and it's going to take you some time and probably some back and forth with your, you know, advisor, the person you're working with. But again, we offer help with the lit review as well as other sections or chapters of the dissertation. But this is a kind of a general overview of the chapter 2 and some of the strategies that go into it, and the content that's pretty typical. Again, except for, you know, the actual literature, which is going to be different for everybody. Any other questions? Right, I'm going to put this information. Whoops, I'm sorry. It went to that. Reading view. I want to view. I want all that. I'll put that. Okay, that. All right. No other questions? Okay, here's one. We are encouraged to review literature per objective. Okay, so you have different objectives in the study, and you need to review literature per objective, is what it sounds like. If that's the case, I mean, just if you have a specific requirements that you have to review literature per your objective, I mean, everything is the same. It would be just do it, you know, per objective. It just seems like a little more focused, like it's sectioned out into objectives. So which kind of may make it easier, because a little bit in a way, because you already have kind of your organization there. You know, here's the literature that supports objective number 1. Here's the literature that supports objective number 2. So. Okay, any other questions? Okay, you're welcome. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, great. I'm going to let if there's any questions, let me know. If not, I'm going to let you go. All right, everybody, thank you for coming. And we do offer other webinars and other chapters, so check our you know, our webinar schedule, and you know, there's other ones out there that may be helpful to you. All right, thank you very much. Take care, everybody.